Morning all, what's up? I hope you had a great weekend. What an epic Grand Prix was the 999th Formula 1 race. Loved every single second of it. There was loads to talk about, which means there's loads of questions, so we might as well get into it. Right, let's start with this one. Probably the biggest turning point in the Grand Prix, I guess, wasn't it? It was the point where Vettel spun, and Gibran Iakani asks this question, which I guess is the question on a number of people's lips. Why is Vettel making so many mistakes? Do you think he crumbles under pressure? And, he says, do you think Ferrari could start backing Charles now? Well, I think way too early, first of all, to start throwing all your eggs behind one driver. I think that's just something that will naturally play out over the season. But why does Vettel make so many mistakes? And, you know, in reality, he probably doesn't make very many, but when you compare him to the absolute top tier of drivers, which these guys are, which he's one of, you know, the Lewis Hamiltons, the Fernando Alonsos, the Sebastian Vettels, those guys are the very, very cream of the crop. Those are the ones who young drivers look up to, aspire towards. The multiple world champions, the people who have got there because they make the fewest mistakes. And yet, over the last couple of seasons, we've seen a number of them. And I think does he crumble under pressure? Probably yes, he does to some extent. You know, you have to say that because he's under huge pressure. Yesterday, he was under massive pressure from Lewis Hamilton at that moment. He could see that his position was slipping away. And that's a car that probably shouldn't be quicker than him under those conditions, Lewis Hamilton, and yet he forced him into making an error. And that's something that Sebastian Vettel has to get on top of, and I don't know how he does that. I don't know whether he needs to start looking at some kind of psychological help training. Lots of drivers find that useful. I don't know, only he will know that. But yes, he's making too many mistakes, and whilst we can probably argue that it played a big part in last year's championship to some extent, certainly in the first half of the season. Did it cost him the championship? I don't know, but those things will cost you a championship if they keep going. So yes, he's got to get on top of it. And you know, I think Ferrari have a number of issues right now. They've got reliability issues. They've certainly got the pace in the car, but they've got a fragile car, it seems, or certainly got fragile elements. And they've got a fragile driver in Sebastian Vettel, because my biggest worry would be, not only did he make that mistake, and that's symptomatic of other mistakes he's made in recent times as well, but he was outpaced, like absolutely outpaced by his new young teammate. And when we talk about fragility in Sebastian Vettel, for me that would be the biggest worry. How's he going to deal with that? How's he going to cope with that if it continues to happen? And at the same time, if he's making mistakes, how is he going to cope with the fact that he may no longer be the absolute out-and-out star at Ferrari, the out-and-out number one? The number one status will be something that comes gradually over the year, depending who ends up out in front. And on the pace of yesterday and the performance we've seen of Charles so far, there's no reason that couldn't be him. So, back on the road again this week, but it won't stop me answering your questions. I'm off to Monaco first, and then to Berlin, filming some more track guides for Formula E. So you can follow me on that over the course of the rest of this week. By the way, at the end of this video, I will be giving away that silver bracelet from the Mechanist. So if you entered that competition, thank you. Stay tuned right to the end and you'll find out if you won or not. Right, back to the questions. This one from Scott Deal. He says, hi Elvis, many including me are wondering what a cylinder fault could be as described by Ferrari. Could you shed some light on this subject? Well, a cylinder fault could be kind of anything that stops one cylinder within the engine performing. That's what they're hinting towards. So it could be anything from a spark plug, it could be the injectors, it could be some kind of compression issue, it could even be a mapping issue. The impression I got from Matteo Binotto's comments were that he didn't seem to think it was too serious. The engine was obviously still running, so it wasn't anything that was terminal, and he seemed to be suggesting it might be a fairly quick and easy fix, in which case, if that's true, then great. They'll run that engine on Friday in China just to see how it performs. They'll have obviously looked at it over the course of the gap between here and China, but it looks like it may not be the end of that engine. So a cylinder fault, anything to do with that cylinder stopping the full normal power production happening in one of the cylinders inside that V6 engine. Without more information, we can't say specifically what that could be at this point. Andrew asks this one. He says, "Hi Mark, love your YouTube channel." Thank you very much, Andrew. Just a question about the last corner or straight. Why did Max not overtake Charles? Surely he could have, as the safety car went into the pit lane and Lewis would have been past the safety car line. Probably a stupid question. No such thing as a stupid question in this business, so thank you for asking it. The answer, the reason that he didn't overtake him, was because although the safety car went into the pit lane, we were still under safety car conditions. And well, we can get into the sporting regs. So Article 39.15 for the geeks out there says that if the safety car is still in operation on the last lap of the race, he will pull into the pit lane, but the cars will continue around to cross the finish line without overtaking each other. So that's how it has to finish. So although the safety car wasn't on the circuit, the lights never went off to indicate that he'd be pulling in and pulling the race back under racing conditions or green flag conditions. So we were effectively still under the safety car, even though the safety car doesn't take the checkered flag come the end of the race. That's the answer. On a similar subject, Phil Kitchen says, Elvis, may not be your area of expertise, but was the safety car the right call for Sector 1 so close to the end of the race? They must have known the marshals wouldn't clear the cars. Would waved yellows have been an option? Well, Phil, you've got to remember, obviously what happened in Japan under the safety car a couple of years ago is still fresh in everybody's minds. That's a big issue for people, that running cars under waved yellows, you're still relying on the drivers at that point to do as they're told and slow down. And the other thing is, we've got a brand new race director, of course, since the death of Charlie Whiting, who doesn't want to take a big risk, doesn't want to make any mistakes. I just think there were two cars in dangerous positions, and for me it was the right call. Yes, it may have robbed us of a bit of last lap action, but safety has to be paramount, particularly when you've got a new guy sitting there in race control having to make those big decisions. I think it would be very harsh to judge him and criticise him too harshly. Roman Wazarab says, Elvis, a lot of passing early on in Bahrain. Do you think it's due to DRS or more equity between the teams and drivers, or other reasons? I think actually it's a combination of those things. DRS undoubtedly helps. We've got a much more powerful DRS this year with a bigger flap, 20mm bigger of course on the rear wing. We've also had 3 DRS zones in Bahrain, which definitely played an impact, and that's open to debate whether that was a good or bad thing. Personally, I think it was a good thing. I think with the current cars we kind of need it, and yes, we always get passing up in towards turn 4 in Bahrain, but I think we had lots of it, and it gave us a real opportunity. You know, Lewis Hamilton went around the outside of Sebastian Vettel on more than one occasion at turn 4, and that was because he had that slingshot from DRS heading up the straight from the exit at turn 3. So DRS definitely plays a part. And also you've got to say that the new regulation change, the new aero changes for this year, for 2019, seem to be playing a positive role. We don't know how much yet, it's difficult to say at this stage, but drivers are able to follow each other seemingly a little bit closer, and that means that your overtakes are more likely to happen anyway. So combine that with a very close pack, certainly the midfield incredibly close this year. I think the Ferraris and the Mercedes at times, and it's going to be at different times over the course of the season, are incredibly close to each other. So when you've got close performance of cars, you've got the regulations that allow the cars to follow each other a little bit more closely than perhaps we had last year, plus throw in a much more powerful and much more frequent DRS. You know, those are all the ingredients you are going to need to increase the overtaking. So I think we've got to look at all this as a positive, in that in Australia, a circuit where we saw almost no overtakes in 2018, we saw more in 2019. Bahrain again, China's going to be another great race, another circuit where overtaking is definitely possible. So I think the way we're moving forward at this stage, and it's very early days, but at this stage it's all looking positive, and I think there's plenty to look forward to over the course of this season, from overtaking and just close battles. Remember, it's not all about overtaking. It's about the close battles is what really counts. Drivers racing wheel to wheel, and that is what we seem to have a bit more of in 2019. Barath Nag says this one. Elvis, 2 questions. Okay, so the first question, is reliability something that's going to hurt Ferrari over the course of this season? And the second question is, 2 races, 2 front wings broken or damaged because they were too low. What are your thoughts on this? Okay, well, the first point in terms of Ferrari's reliability, yes, we saw, you know, in the most heartbreaking way that reliability play a role yesterday for Ferrari. Will it hurt them over the season? I mean, it's just, nobody knows. It's just way too early to tell at this point. We're 2 races in, and yes, they have had issues, but that doesn't mean they can't fix them. So yeah, there's no answer to that question at this point. They will be working and doing everything they can to try and make sure reliability doesn't impact their championship too greatly. They have a fast car, and if they can make that a reliable fast car, they're in a great position. In terms of the front wings, because they come out right as wide as the outside edge of the front tyre, it's highly likely, and much more likely, we're going to get contact between the cars. Daniel Ricciardo's issue, of course, was him running over a drain or a kind of concrete drain off the edge of the track. So that was a slight anomaly, and I think, you know, maybe even with last year's front wings, if he'd done the same thing, he may well have damaged that anyway. So I'm not sure that was a particular case of the front wing being wider or lower and that causing the problem. I think we all said before the season started, because the wings come out as wide as the outside edge of the tyre, you're going to get contact, particularly in the early parts of races when you're launching off the line, you've got 20 cars jostling for position into turn 1. It's much more likely you're going to make contact, you're going to get punctures, you're going to get end plates damaged. And yes, you know, we are seeing some of that, and I think as the season goes on we'll continue to see it, but it's just going to be a feature of this year. I don't think it's a massive problem. It may be something that we'll look at again. I mean, actually we had this a few years ago. We had wings that came out to the extremes of the car's width, and we had the same problems. We had loads of debris on lap 1, we had loads of punctures and end plate damage and that kind of thing, and so we narrowed them in again for that very reason. Now we've gone back, so you know, we may well look at this again later on in the season and think, okay, it hasn't worked, we'll go back to bringing them in just a little bit. But I don't think it's a massive drama. I think it's something that everyone has to get used to, and just like with anything, a driver has to get used to the width of his own car and take that into consideration at the end of the day. Right, time to go and get on an aeroplane. I'll see you shortly. Right, this could be the first ever question at 30,000 feet on Ask Elvis, but it comes from Coup de Rude, who says, again, a good show, Mark, thank you. That's in reference to last week, thank you, appreciate it. He says, what does an F1 driver do when he has to sneeze at 300 kilometres an hour? Well, I don't think he has an awful lot of choice, does he? He's just got to sneeze. This question comes from Christmas365, and he says, which rookie do you think will make the biggest name for themselves this season, and which driver do you think will find himself without a drive in 2020? What a good question, and a really difficult question to answer. First of all, let's go with the driver I think is going to make the biggest name for themselves as a rookie. I think it's going to be Lando Norris. I think he's in a car that's shown massive improvement over last year, and so lots of eyes are on McLaren. There's lots of positivity around McLaren, and he seems to be doing a very good job inside that car. I think he'll make a name for himself. I think he'll stand out as a shining light at the end of the season. I know that Carlos Sainz has had terrible luck so far, and that will change, but it's going to be interesting, the battle between the two. But he looks like a good driver. He's handling himself very well. He's dealing with pressure. He's doing a good job. So if that continues, he could well come out of this season looking very good. In terms of who will be left without a drive next year, it's a really hard one, isn't it? In terms of the rookies, if you want to look at the rookies, I mean, maybe Antonio Giovinazzi, perhaps. And I mean, no disrespect to him, but he's clearly not got quite to grips with the car like Kimi Raikkonen has, and perhaps is not showing the results just yet of a car that's capable of much more. Maybe those kind of differences make the difference come the end of the season. I think there are other drivers that will lose a drive before him, but if you want to focus on the rookies, and you want me to put my money on the line, I will go with Giovinazzi, although I think it will be harsh because I do think he's a good driver. So arrived in Monte Carlo, as you can see, and look, circuit very much under construction. That is what will be the garages that the teams will work from for both the Formula E race and the Formula 1 Grand Prix, of course. Down here behind me, the grandstands are being assembled in front of the famous harbour, whilst the people of Monaco enjoy their daily routines down here. So from up here we get a great view of what will be turns 8 and 9, the exit of the swimming pool just down here. Now what you can't see, because they don't exist yet, are the steel Armco barriers that are going to be in place roughly where those temporary barriers are, just down there, currently protecting the construction workers from the traffic. And the quickest way through that corner is to run incredibly close to those steel barriers, and I'm talking incredibly close, running the right front wheel sometimes millimetres away from the steel barrier, or then clipping the left-hand curve on the exit of turn 9 and running on down here towards Rascasse Corner. That's good. So I'll get back to the Ask Elvis questions in a moment, but it's just really interesting looking around this place before the circuit's been constructed. I don't think I've ever been here this early before. Of course, in Formula 1, we just turn up when everything's polished and ready to go. So it's a really unique insight into what goes on to make these kind of races happen. In fact, where I am right now is kind of the ACM control tower. This is where race control will be based. It's where the circuit offices will be based. All the timing is done from in here. When somebody has to go and see the race director after being naughty, that all happens up here. Drivers' briefings happening in rooms over there behind me. And down there is the pit lane behind me. Now, I remember coming here when there was no such thing as garages. In fact, what they used to call garages was an almost like a broom cupboard type space. So small, in fact, that you couldn't even fit the full Formula 1 car in there. We used to reverse it in, and the front half of the car used to stick out into the pit lane. That's how small they were. And the rest of the team used to be based out of an awning off the side of the truck. So nowadays, they don't know how lucky they are. They've got these garages being constructed behind me, double height, double level. They've got more space than they know what to do with. Okay, Glenn Robertson asks this question. Ahoy there, Mark, he says. I was wondering how liveries are applied to F1 cars. Are they painted and then the sponsors just slapped on, or are they wrapped? And is development time spent on finding lightweight paints and decals? Well, the answer to that, Glenn, is that there are a number of different solutions. Some teams do wrap their cars. If you think about the Toro Rosso of the past few years, it's had that pretty intricate bull design across the whole back end. That was a wrapped car. Probably too complex to paint, and certainly too complex to paint spares, multiple spares that would then match up seamlessly. So that one's wrapped. Others are painted. At McLaren, even we had that the West livery that had that real gradient between silvers and greys and reds. That was all airbrushed. It was painted, but there was a lot of effort and time put into developing lightweight paints, using the minimum amount of paint, the most lightweight fillers. The teams will work with their paint suppliers for exactly that reason, to try and find lightweight solutions. And exactly the same thing applies to stickers and decals as well. There's obviously got to be consideration put into the fact that any sticker or any decal of a sponsor's logo provides a step over the surface of the car. You can account for some of that with the lacquer over the top. You can smooth the whole thing out, and teams absolutely do that. But ultimately the team want to keep the aero surface as smooth as possible, and to keep the products that they're using as lightweight as possible as well. So yes, absolutely, lots of effort put into making sure that's considered. Right, now the boys are just rigging my skateboard over here with GoPros, and I'm about to try and do a lap of the circuit. Now, I did try and do this once before for a video of the F1 circuit, and I got almost all the way around before the police stopped me. The difference this time is we actually have a permit for filming this kind of thing, so I'm hoping that we'll kind of get the whole lap in this time. Wish me luck. Right, it's been a long day. We are done at the racetrack. It is now quite late at night, nearly midnight here in Monaco, so apologies for the late delivery of this video. But let's wrap it up with two final questions, and then I'm going to give away that bracelet from the mechanists for all those of you who entered the competition over the course of the Bahrain Grand Prix weekend. Right, first one from Peter Mardanandez, who says, what can be done on setups when quali takes place? And the answer to that is very little. So parc ferme kicks in from the moment the car leaves the garage for the start of qualifying. Parc ferme means that the car is essentially under the control of the race scrutineers and the FIA technical delegate. And that means that there are very few changes that can be made, and they are restricted to things like changing tyres, bleeding the brakes, looking over the car, making inspections and any checks that might be required. You can make minor changes to the front wing, so the front wing flap angle can be changed, but very little else. The teams will generally, after qualifying, pull the floor off the car just to have a good look around, take the wheels off, take the brake ducts off, just as an inspection, for inspection purposes. If they find something wrong, they can go to the FIA technical delegate and say, look, we found this problem, you know, a reliability issue, something got broken during qualifying, we want to change it like for another component ahead of the race. And generally that will be allowed, but you've got to get permission first. Other than that though, it's literally restricted to those things: tyres, brakes, bleeding brakes, any kind of fluids that need replenishing, but all like for like. Nothing can be changed, no specific specification can be changed. And the front wing, as I say, just flap angle change, and that is it. The only exception to that is if there's a change in climatic conditions. So if qualifying is dry and then it's declared a wet race on a Sunday, then those restrictions go out the window. You can make changes to the car if the change in climatic conditions is announced by race control. So very little is the answer. In terms of setup, in terms of mechanical setup, you're not allowed to change anything between the time the car leaves the garage for the start of qualifying and between the time when it leaves the grid for the start of the formation lap. That's when parc ferme kicks in, and that's when those restrictions apply. Right, finally then, Patrick Shellen says, is Ferrari getting its priorities right? Running Schumacher in the test gives publicity, but they have development drivers, Fuoco and Regon, with less than 2 GPs. Wouldn't it be better to give them a feel for the real car on track compared to the simulator? Well, Patrick, I mean, that's a good point. Okay, you know, Ferrari use those guys, Fuoco and Regon, they use them in the simulator. And yes, there's an absolute benefit to the simulator drivers having experience of running the real car on a real circuit, just so they can compare what they're feeling in the simulator, in the virtual world, to what's happening on the real world. So yes, there's a benefit to doing that. However, how much have Ferrari got their eye on the future? How much do they see those two guys as the future of Ferrari? In reality, they probably don't. They are there doing a job in the simulator, but that's probably as far as Ferrari see them going within the Ferrari program, if you like. Schumacher, Mick Schumacher, that is, I think they probably see as a potential future race driver for them. So to give him some experience of the real car, not just for his benefit, but for Ferrari's benefit, to assess him, to see how he handles it, to see what he's like, but maybe to see how he compares to his dad, who they know so well. You know, this is a massive publicity stunt. Let's make no mistake about it. It brings an awful lot of publicity, an awful lot of attention to both Mick Schumacher and to Ferrari itself. And it's a great story, isn't it? It's a great narrative that they can play upon. But I think the bigger picture here, and the political movement behind this, is not just Mick Schumacher. He has a machine pushing him forward, the Schumacher machine driving his career. And I think that if he can show well in the real modern Ferrari, and don't forget he's driving an Alfa Romeo as well, so that will give both him and the team a back-to-back comparison of two different chassis running the same Ferrari power unit, which is valuable in all areas. You know, this is an experiment that could, in the end, further down the line, pay dividends, and I think this is an opportunity they're looking at in that regard. So have they got their priorities right? Depends where you see their priorities lying. Yes, there's benefit to simulator drivers running the car, but maybe that's not going to really benefit the longer term future of Ferrari, and perhaps Mick Schumacher being in the car maybe does that. Right, thank you so much everybody for all your questions. Loads of them again this week, really appreciate it. Let's get in then to giving away that beautiful silver bracelet from the Mechanists and the GPBox.com. Okay, many of you entered this competition by replying to the message from the previous giveaway video in the comment section using the hashtag GPBBAH and letting me know your favourite item from the Mechanists page on the gpbox.com. So thank you so much to everybody who took part. Really appreciate it. Thank you to the mechanists for giving me the bracelet to give away. Thank you to gpbox.com as well for the same reason. Let's get into it then. I'm going to scroll through all the way up and down. Hundreds of you up and down, all the way to the top and all the way back up to the bottom. And at some point we will stop randomly. Whenever the page stops, whichever one of you is in the middle, you will be the winner, and I will get that out to you. So here we go. Keep scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. Stop. See where it lands. And that is Russ HP. Russ HP on YouTube. Thank you so much. Let me see what you've written. Oh, you're in Perth, Western Australia. That's going to cost me a lot of money to send it to you, but there you go. Well done. Congratulations, Russ. I will contact you directly and we'll make sure we get your address and get that beautiful bracelet out to you. Thank you so much for taking part. Thank you to all of you. I hope you all enjoyed the Bahrain Grand Prix. It was pretty epic, wasn't it? And I cannot wait for the Chinese Grand Prix in just a couple of weeks, because that will be another spectacular one, I have no doubt. Keep the questions coming. I will do my best to answer them. Russ, this bracelet will be on the way to you until I get home, which will be the end of this week after this little trip. I can't do that, but as soon as you give me your address, I'll make sure that gets in the post as soon as I possibly can. Thank you so much, guys. I will speak to you very soon. Ta-da.